GoPro mounted thing up on the windscreen.
What on? How many gears and tracker? Everything works on tracker. It's now got 8 buttons on it. So move, side, park, stop.
So they're all buttons.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually thinking about using I've got the joystick here.
Okay.
For up, down, left and
quite
right.
relaxed now. Mine doesn't work.
Yeah. So stop.
There you go.
Wow. He gave a thumbs up.
Very good.
didn't he?
Yeah.
Sort of cool once inside, so I put it all in.
Reset.
Plastic. Got the actual front of the panel. I've got a really big 4-line 20-character display with bigger ones.
We there?
It's on a lot more.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, good evening everybody. Thank you very much for making up the Queen's Domain this not so miserable Wednesday evening. This is our November presentation on portable and field operations. For those of you who've been looking outside the shack at the great outside world, you realise the weather's getting nice, it's getting warmer, it's getting almost dry with the rain going away. It's a good time to be out in the field doing exciting things in the fresh air and sunshine. We've had in the past a number of inquiries from members regarding things they can do outside as part of bushwalking or other outside activities. And a big part of what the club does, or some members do in the club, are the on-the-air type activities, so SOTA, Worldwide Flora, and other external outside activities, is however a part of the hobby which requires a level of both dedication and preparation and planning. And thought tonight, rather than doing a standalone presentation where one person talks about one thing for 45 minutes, we do a different format where we have several speakers talking for a short amount of time about things they find interesting, exciting, and hopefully shared their lesson learned and advice to others as to how they too can get outside away from the shack and do some things in the weather. This evening we have 10 presentations. I'll be passing over shortly here to Linda Luther. For those of you who are not familiar, Linda is the Alara coordinator for Tasmania, a long-time amateur radio enthusiast, and we're talking tonight on the worldwide flora and fauna.
Yep, that's the one.
Yep. Interesting options here in terms of doing things in a civilised manner for those who don't like hiking through the muck and mud, which I'm a very big fan of. But beyond that, I will pass over to Linda. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. So how did I get started in this crazy activity? Well, we were setting up our remote station at Black Hills, and so we had Martin working on various things up in the in Black Hills, trying to get the remote station set up, and I was twiddling around on 40 metres seeing what on earth was going on. I was concerned about what my direction in amateur radio should be, because Martin does contesting, he's very good at that, and I didn't want to get involved in the same thing. I wanted something a little different. So twiddling around on 40 metres, I found some parks stations. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I started collecting a few parks. I didn't really know what I was doing, but people kept coming up saying CQ Parks, and I kept saying, yeah, right, got you. Write it down in my logbook, and away we go. And I'm very pleased that the first certificate I got was all doing that search and pounce stuff, rather than getting spots and knowing that someone was coming up and dashing onto the frequency. So I'm pleased that, first certificate would have been about 50 parks, and I've got that twiddling. So it shows you how long we spent up at the shack twiddling around. So having got that far, we then were planning a caravan trip early this year, and so I said to Martin, oh, well, if we're doing that, then instead of being a hunter for parks, I could be an activator. Yo! So he said, oh yeah. I talked this over with some of my Lara mates, and they said, oh yeah, go for it, Linda. And when I went back to Martin, he looked a little pale because it meant that we've got the TS590 Kenwood, and he had to take it out of his remote setup. We've got TS590 at Belrive and one at Black Hills, and to achieve this he had to take one out of his remote setup. Not hard getting it out, and we had a ball. So if I get the right presentation here.
It's at the top.
Oh, I thought it was this one.
Try it.
This one?
No, that's
don't
what
like
mine,
that
sorry.
one.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything's called Reast. Apologies.
Okay, So this is at Bauer on the Murray River. So this was my first real operation. You can see the key things here are that I meant to bring my laser pointer but didn't. The squid pole is braced against the car here. There is a dipole at the top of the squid pole that you can probably almost see. And it being February in Victoria, it's very hot, so we had a handy blanket to go over the operating position. Now, somewhere here I can go.
How appropriate.
Yes.
Right for it.
Okay, thank
Don't
you.
get RF burns on.
Yeah, so this is me operating. Key things are that I've still got my log, written log here, and TS 590, and that's how we went. So I managed to operate VK5YL, Shirley, who's the president of Alara, and I was wrapped in that. So that was good fun. So we travelled around and doing a number of parks. We had a good time doing all of that. The main thing is that I found everyone was very helpful, and they had good ideas as to what to do. And they said, well, why don't you use VK Portalog instead of writing everything down, and why don't you get a tablet for it? So I got a tablet, and I've got VK Portalog, and I've got no idea how to make that show up there. Okay, I need to get it up and on now.
It's a bit tapped, yeah.
Yeah, so this is VK Portalog. Just trying to work out how far to go back. So, yeah, so the first thing you can do with VK Portalog is you can find out where you are. So this is a value if you're on a caravan trip, because it tells you where the nearest points are. So you can look here and see there's East Risdon State Reserve. If anyone here can get onto East Risdon State Reserve and do an operation, I'd really like to know, because I haven't managed to get there. Peter Murrell Reserve, so you can see which are the closest points. Now from here it's not so important because you know where you are, but when you're travelling around in a caravan, knowing where the nearest thing is really useful. So it tells you where you are. Point number one. Okay, and then you can log on using this, and it's really easy to log here because you say, okay, where are we? So I've got VK7, VK7GN. Oh, his name's Martin. Oh, that's good. I can pretend I know him. Frequency. You need to be sure that you get this in right with the point in the right spot. You can change whether it's 5959. Once the save button is green, you can hit that, but it could be a park to park operation, and so you've got an opportunity here to put in the number of the park that you work. Now similarly with SOTA, if you're using it for SOTA, you can put in the SOTA reference. So that's all that you need to do. You save that, it's down here, and you're ready for the next one. So it's really easy to use. It saves it to a file, and you can upload that to the park's website in the evening, so that the way the park system works is it relies on the activator putting in the log to say who has been worked in that park. If I'm operating as a hunter, looking for people who are working in parks, I don't need to do anything. So my certificates that I've got have been achieved by people using Portalog or uploading their logs to the BKFF website in the evening to show that they've worked for me. So that's the Portalog. So the key thing with that is that there's a button you can tick to say leave the screen active. When I first got it up, the screen was disappearing all the time before I could make the next contact. The other trick is that I find quite often I hit that button by mistake and get all these smiley faces. Because when you're working quickly, and I'd normally have that on here. So I have my tablet, my speaker, the front end of the radio, a remote control thing so that I can call CQ just hitting a button, and the microphone, and that's my setup for operating. Okay, so yeah, so I got my tablet. I'll get rid of these smiley faces, and I'm probably ready for another picture. So someone will make that happen for me. Yeah, so that's exactly what I just described. Me operating. Got a stool here, tablet, and that's all I need to operate. I don't have anything else. I'm close to the car because the radio, which is down on the floor here, is in the car, and the battery is in the car. So, yeah. The other thing that I do is you don't need internet to use Portalog. It operates alone. I've got it linked up to the internet at the moment, but there's no need to do that. What I do though is keep my phone by me, because if there's a park-to-park opportunity, someone operating from another park, it's really good points for me if I can operate to another park. And so if I've got my phone on, I can hear when there's another park, and I can tune around the frequency to find that other park and work that park. So so I use my phone for my internet activity and my tablet just for logging. Okay. Yeah, so I've got a bit ahead of myself here, because it was on returning home. Martin started putting the Kenwood TS590 that I talked about before, putting it back into the remote situation, and he said, oh shit. As all the IP addresses and all the connections had to be remade to set up his remote situation again. He said, I'm not going to do that again, I'll buy you a new radio. So I said, yes. So the advantage of this FT891 is that it's got the front panel, which is able to be taken off the radio itself. So this connects through to the radio down there. This is all I need to operate, because the radio and the ATU are down there in the car, and that's all connected to the battery. Now the battery is my challenging point at the moment. Can I go
Yep.
on one? Yes, so that's me at Derwent Cliffs near New Norfolk. Yes, so this was the next lesson learned. Yes, you can operate in the car if it's a wet day. Lesson learned. Lesson number 2 learned is we've now got the squid pole. We now have the squid pole supported by a ladder. It's a manufactured ladder. My assistant here, Martin, has created this as a firm support. So the squid pole is no longer braced against the car. It's a freestanding activity. So that's a good feature. The other feature we have on this car, you may have noticed this car has changed colour from the black one we had earlier. On the other side of it, we've now got a sun canopy that comes out, so I don't need to have that crappy blanket anymore. Okay, so this is showing battery issues. God, it looks looks even bigger. This is a very big battery, you can see. This sits in the car. It takes both of us to move it around. We are not going SOTA with that. We could do SOTA. We could no. We could do some better activity with this smaller one. So there are some parks, and East Risdon may well prove to be one of them, where you can't actually get the car into the park, but by walking a few hundred yards you'd be able to operate. And I think between the two of us we could carry the stuff that's needed to operate and use this battery instead of this enormous thing that is really car based. So my operation is a car based operation. It relies on having everything in the right boxes in the right spots to take it all and operate effectively, and I'm having an absolute ball with it. We are better off with our battery than these folk. This is from 1926, and so my battery is smaller than his. So so this is 3YJ and 3YK operating. I have this picture from Peter Wolfenden, because one of the other things that I do is I'm setting up the database for the history archive for the WIA, and I came across this picture and I thought, talking about portable operation, here's one to see. So that's my story, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Linda. Thank you very much, Linda, for that. I certainly learned a lot more there than I've ever learned about on the air stuff, so thank you very much. It actually sounds a lot easier than I expected, apart from the excellent stuff and needing a very good procurement officer to fill in some of the gaps in the inventory.
And an antenna erector. It was I can set up my station with the radio parts, and Martin sets up the squid pole. They take about the same time to set up. I missed showing you nifty little thing. This is I could pass that around. I do need it back because it's one of the key things from the squid pole. So it's a hose clamp, but the issue is that it's got heat shrink rubber around it, which keeps the squid pole up in the air. Some other people use other creative devices to keep the squid pole up, but this works really well.
You should patent it and make a fortune and retire a gajillionaire.
Bunning also sells some, because I think I have the same type of squid pole at home. They also sell this gasket edging that has a slit down the side of it. And on mine, I have gone and bought 11 or 12 whatever hose clamps, and that just slides around that. I was going to ask, on the ladder arrangement for the squid pole, did you stake that ladder to the ground at all, or was it just?
No, it freestands. It's a steel one. It's not one of the aluminium ones, so it's got a bit of weight to it.
Right.
And I also made it so that the squid pole is at the centre of gravity, so I had to make some adjustments to the steps on it. It's not just tied on with a bit of good.
Portable power. You mentioned the battery, the 817. How long will it run off a small battery like that?
Well, I find that to get the target is to get 44 contacts when you're operating the park. So I've been going for about 50, just in case some of them aren't quite as good as they might be. And I can do that in about an hour with my thing, and we've had no problem with the power at all lasting that long.
It's surprising how little current you draw running sideband, because you're only transmitting for less than half the time. And sideband is very intermittent. So while you're operating 100 watts, it's not dragging 100 watts out of the battery all the time. So I haven't worked out the answer to your question because we've never run out of batteries.
That's a good outcome to have.
Yeah, but we do have a separate battery from the one that needs to operate our car, just in case.
Yes, that's a very good idea. I guess also for resident, something that's smaller and lighter again might be a handy thing to have.
Yeah, I mean having lots of alternatives
Yeah.
is one of the good things about portable work, and having some way to overcome what you're talking about by having a spare battery.
I think those who have the luxury of having an Oompa Loompa to carry their field kit around with them and set up the squid poles and other strenuous activities.
I do think it's well, for us it's definitely a two-person activity.
What was your charging arrangement for those, or did you charge them out, charge them up before you went out, or did you
Charge
have
them
it
up
on board?
before we go out.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have a second battery in the car, which is connected to the car generation, so that's always charged up by the car.
Mm.
So we've always got that one if all else fails. Yeah.
You've got 4 batteries.
No, I just connect to it. It connectors anyway. I mean, that's there to run the mobile 706 mobile in the car, so there's always power. If you notice, there was on one of those pictures, there was a Anderson distribution board thing. I have those all over the place, and you can always plug into power somewhere.
Very nice. The waste likes one.
Okay, I think while Linda's busy putting her bits and pieces away, we'll get things sorted out for the next presentation by our friend David here.
I'll make myself a bit smaller.
I was thinking, again, the ubiquitous squid pole in action.
There'll be a few similarities and a few interesting contrasts between what we do for soda and what Linda described for parks. No, I would have left it as impressed instead of exploring it. Right, thanks Sean. Although Tasmanian born and bred, I hold VK3 and VK7 XDM. I got transported to Victoria for the crime of needing a job about 20 years ago, and now, although I'm now retired, I've still got some volunteer interests over there, so I spent about a bit less than 50% of the time in Victoria and about 50% back here. If you hear me on air, I go by the on-air name Mitch. I came to amateur radio fairly recently, got my foundation licence in 2012, but I've been a bushwalker for over 50 years. So, to me, the natural direction to go with amateur radio was soda, because it combines the two activities, amateur radio and bushwalking, really nicely. So, that'll be the focus of my talk. I won't talk much about summits on the air itself. I'm not sure how much you know, but there's plenty on the web if you want to find out. But it was launched in 2002 in Great Britain with the sole purpose of encouraging amateur radio activity from summits. And if you look at the activity that's grown up in Australia since it was launched here in Victoria in 2012, it certainly achieved that purpose of enhancing amateur radio activity. VK7 started in 2014, thanks to Justin, and since 2016 we've now got 796 summits in the state, so there's plenty of opportunity to get out there and get some summits. And all of VK and ZL's now covered. Now, it's not inherently a competitive activity. It's about setting your own goals and aspirations. But I must admit, I do keep an eye on my points and how I rank in scale of things from time to time. But my personal goals when I started out was to go for as far as possible the higher value summits, although I have activated a few one-pointers. Where I can, go for the winter bonus. And for those that you don't know, between 15th of June and 14th of July, in VK7 and VK3, VK2, there's a 3-point bonus. For us, it's only on the 10-pointers, but in VK3, it's for 8-pointers and 10-pointers. So we chase a lot of those. And I like to go for new summits, i.e. haven't been activated before. So, here's a couple. It's Mount Sterling in the Victorian High Country, obviously in winter bonus period. Mount Killiecrankie, first activation on Flinders Island. Ragged Jack in the Ben Lomond National Park. I can tell you by the time I got to the top I was ragged. It's just a scramble up to the ridge, but along the top here there's no track, it's just, you know, Scapari or another scrub about this high and sometimes this high. That was the first activation. Council's Peak on Flinders Island, another first activation. Now fortunately the SOTA rules say that you don't actually have to get to the summit to activate it. You can activate within 25 vertical metres of the summit, so that's the activation zone. So, quite obviously, I didn't try and get up there to activate that. The rules for activators, you must use legitimate access. The fact that a summit is listed as a summit on the SOTA program doesn't guarantee that it is accessible. There are quite a few summits around that are not accessible permanently, like in water reserves in Victoria, or they're on private land. Those on private land are quite okay to activate, provided you get permission. A notable one here is Mount Barrow. Climbing around the gate to the Air Service Australia site would constitute an illegal activation. Operation from or in the vicinity of vehicles is not permitted, so that's a complete contrast to parks and the setup that Linda described that she uses. Obviously you've got to operate from a portable power source, that's my definition. You need at least 4 QSOs to get the points. Now, 1 QSO qualifies as activating the summit, but to get the points you need at least 4. Contact through a repeater doesn't count. Contact with others on the same summit doesn't count. However, you put 2 and 2 together from the previous slide. If you're in the AZ and you're with another amateur and he's outside the AZ, he can chase and you can activate, and then vice versa. Now, in the current propagation conditions, sometimes it's been very hard to get 4 QSOs, and particularly in Victoria, I tend to go with 1 or 2 other mates, and we sometimes got by doing it that way. It's completely legal. And you can only claim activator points for a particular summit once in a calendar year. Now, all the times in SOTA are based on UTC. Now, if you think about that, it means, for example, that you could go up to Mount Wellington on the 1st of January, activate it prior to 11 o'clock, Eastern Summertime, and post 11 o'clock, Eastern Summertime. So it's 2 different years, but you get 20 points for one activation.
Not competitive at all.
No.
No. All bands, modes and equipment that's compliant with your licence can be used, and that includes CW obviously, but also digital modes. And I've built a Raspberry Pi to run WSJTX and do FT8, thinking it's one way to get around the difficulty with propagation in some circumstances at the moment. And like most competitions, although it's not a competition, you need the minimum information you need to exchange with another operator to have a valid QSO. It's 2 bits of information that's not known to either of you, and that's typically call signs and your signal reports, and often the SOTA reference number, although you don't, these days you don't need to do that so much because of the alerting and spotting that I'll talk about in a moment. Equipment. I'll go through mine at the end, but fairly obvious. You need a transceiver, a portable power source, an antenna, some means to get it into the air. Most of us use the ubiquitous squid pole, a logbook. VK Portal log works very well for soda, but I still use pencil and paper for actually logging. The mobile device I take is only that rather than the tablet, and logging on something like that doesn't work so well in the field, plus you've got issues with sun and all sorts of things. Mobile phone, whilst not absolutely necessary, very handy for spotting, which I'll get to in a moment. Some hints and tips if you want to get out there. Number one, get started, just get into it. And like other contest modes, if you're a little bit nervous to start with, just do some chasing from the comfort of your shack at home. Look at the site, see what's happening. Most weekends somebody will be out. In fact, this weekend, starting Friday, there's a group in VK3 going out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday into the high country. And they'll probably be working 40 metres, which means we'll be able to chase them here. And then get out there. Some obviously really easy summits to activate here. I'm at Wellington, 20-minute drive up. Mount Rumney, drive up. Some easy walks around the place, Collins Bonnet, Collins Cap, Mount Direction, Harts Peak, only a 2-hour walk, but it's really easy and really good walk as well. There's plenty around.
Does Queen's Domain as to qualify as
No.
Not
Get on
mine.
that.
Not mine.
The rules for a summit are it's got to have 150 metres provenance. I guess you know what that means. If not, there's plenty of information about it. Plan your expedition, particularly if you're trying to do more than one summit in a day. And I try to do that. If you're going to walk into an area, try and get more than one. Or if you're driving to a remote area, try and get more than one. And it's important then to know how long it's going to take you to drive there, between summits, how long it's going to take to walk, allow for your setup time, your operation time. I've got a trip schedule, a spreadsheet, which I'll briefly show later on, which helps me plan all that in advance, and from that to know when I expect to be activating, which helps me then to post an alert. So again, I'll talk about it in a moment. I'll talk about it right now. Prior to going out, post alerts. Attached to the SOTA site is a SOTA Watch site, which handles alerts and spots. And there's also an SOTA group. It used to be Yahoo group, it's now migrated to Groups.io. If you have a look at that, joining up's really easy. You'll see a lot of chatter about what people are, what their intentions are. It's good to do that, because then the chasers are aware of what's going on, and they'll be anticipating. There's quite a few operators around who only chase, and if you start to operate for a while, you'll get to know who they are, and particularly given the current, Murray's nodding, given the current conditions, knowing that you've got possibly 4 out there who are going to look for you, it's really handy. Okay, pick an available frequency. They're the typical ones for 80, 40 and 20. There is a table of suggested preferred calling frequencies, which is, if you can spot yourself, it doesn't matter so much, but there's some preferred frequencies where people will tend to be listening, particularly if you've posted an alert. When you post an alert, you're only indicating the band and the mode, like 7 megahertz SSB. When you spot, you actually spot the exact frequency you're on. So chasers won't know in advance exactly where you'll be, but if you're around these usual frequencies, there's a good chance somebody will be listening. And if you've got mobile coverage, post a spot. Now you don't have to go to the SOTA Watch site to do that. That's a bit clunky to try and do it from a mobile device in the field. Portalog, which Linda showed, that's great for spotting. If we've got time, we can actually show how you do a spot. There's also an application called SOTA Spotter. Now that's great because If you don't have mobile broadband coverage, but you do have mobile phone coverage, you can do an SMS spot rather than an internet spot. As you'd appreciate, you need much less coverage to be able to do an SMS compared to data. And then call CQ, get on with it. Hopefully you'll have a pilot. So be brief. As I said, all you need to say into the call signs and reports. If you listen to some of the experienced chasers, you'll find, and activators, they rattle that off backwards and forwards, and you can get a QSO over in about 20 or 30 seconds. What happens if you get a pilot? First of all, you tend to give priority to anybody calling summit to summit. And like Linda said with park to park, there are additional points, not as an activator, but it's a different points category for summit to summit. You get the summit points and the activator points for both your summit and the other summit. So if somebody's calling summit to summit, they're obviously also portable, like yourself, so give priority to them. Then I tend to give a priority to anybody else who's calling portable or mobile. And perhaps weak signals. Here in VK7, we're fortunate, we'll often get ZLs. New Zealand came on after Tasmania. Yeah.
Yes.
Now the whole island's covered, and there are 2 or 3 zealots over there. ZL1 BYZ's one. He'll almost, if you can get us, he'll regularly pop up as a chaser, particularly early morning and late afternoon on 40 metres. Then tend to work through the rest in order. Respect chasers, what do I mean by that? As an activator, we're really dependent on the chasers, obviously. We need 4 of them minimum. And with the current ban conditions, and if you're doing it midweek, and you've got a particularly poor day, that can be difficult. So we really value the chasers, and there's 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, 6 out there who are regulars. There's VK5 Whiskey Golf, VK2 India Oscar, VK3 Papa Foxtrot, a few others in the eastern states, and a number of those, if not all, you can almost guarantee you can get a contact with if they're there. So in that respect, I do a couple of things. Firstly, I said for activators, we can only get the points on a summit once in a calendar year. Chasers can get the points once each day. And the day ends at either 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time or 11 o'clock summertime. So if I'm on a summit close to 11 o'clock, I'll stay around till after 11 o'clock. So it gives those chasers the opportunity to get double points. Now an activator doesn't get double points, but the chasers do. So you let's say, respect to the chasers. The other thing I do, particularly at the moment, is when I started back in 2012, 40 metres could pretty much get you, you get NVIS into on the VK3 if you're operating there, or VK7 if you're operating here, but also get you up and down the eastern seaboard. That's not the case at the moment. So we tend now to operate 80 metres for NVIS and 40 metres to get further afield. So if I was operating here, I'd start off in 80 and likely get some VK7s, might get the odd VK3 sometimes, and surprisingly sometimes the odd VK2, depends on the time of day. But if I've got my 4 contacts on 80 metres, I'll hang around, switch to 40, because then you're pretty certain you'll be able to pick up the VK5s, VK4s, and give those chasers that we're often relying, give them a chance. In other words, don't be selfish. Then fairly obvious for anybody going bush, be safe, be prepared, be flexible. Conditions can change. The summit will always be there. And let somebody know what your plans are and let them know when you come back. Okay, some of the challenges as an activator. On a lot of the summits you'll find some structures and some trees, whatever, to attach your squid pole. This is Mount Donawang in the Yarra Ranges. A nice comfortable position, that's Kelly Cranky. A nice trig pole to attach your antenna to. That's Rats Castle, west of Great Lake. Other times it's not so handy. This is Hart's Peak in a roaring gale, and rather than go on the exact summit, I got down in the rocks where I could get a bit of shelter, and the squid pole's still got a bend. But sometimes there's no man-made structure, there's no trees, there's no convenient rocks, so it's handy to bring your own squid pole slave. Some other challenges you may face. This was going to Mount Vinegar in the Yarra Ranges after a through state forest after strong winds, and fairly obviously, because our summits are the high points, you often find telecommunications infrastructure. This is Mount Mangana on Bruny. If you on one of those summits operate a little way away from the infrastructure to minimise the QRM. There's quite a few of those around. Mount Mangana, Grey Mountain, Blue Hill, Mount Wellington. Although notice at Mount Wellington, it doesn't seem to cause much interference. Okay. Some resources. Well, the presentation, can that be distributed or put on the website? Yeah, okay, you don't need to take this down. That's the SOTA website. The Bible for us is the Association Reference Manual written by Justin. That's on the website. The groups I've mentioned, Portalog I've mentioned, SOTA Spotter. Another one is SOTA Finder, although Portalog really has now incorporated that, the latest release, that facility that Linda showed where it shows you the nearest summits and parks and so forth. That's what that does, just for SOTA. Some other things, SOTA Beams, company in the UK, they specialise in portable gear, and some of my gear is from there. The online land information system Tasmania, that's a fantastic source. Great free resource of maps, and I use that a lot for planning, access tracks and all the rest of it. The Ables by Bill Wilkinson, that's all of the peaks over 1,100 metres in Tasmania, so it covers many or most of the 8-pointers we've got, which are over 1,000, and all of the 10-pointers, which are over 1,200. And again, route descriptions, times, access, and all that sort of thing. And likewise, this is a blog site by a very avid Tasmanian bushwalker who's done most, if not all, of the Ables. And got a lot of useful information about times and tracks and that sort of thing. Radio Books is run by VK3 FPSR up in Cobram. As well as selling books, he sells waterproof logbooks, which is what I use. I can show you that. Haverfords are a supplier of squid poles. 10-metre squid pole costs about $80. Buy more than 2 and you can save 10. And my email address, very happy to answer any questions anybody's got. I'll just quickly show you. This is only a PDF because the actual spreadsheet wouldn't run. This is my trip scheduler. So you plug in your date, start time, it works out whether you're in the bonus period. You pick your region, or pick your association first, VK3 or VK7, whatever. It works for all of Australia NZL. Pick the region and then the summit, it populates those down here. And you can see here I've got default road drive speed, walking speed. So you plug in your driving distance, often have to modify that, your walking distance, set up time, your operate time, pack up, walk to the, where am I? Here, walk to the next one, and then so on. The good thing about that in advance, as I said, if you're doing more than one activation, it calculates your UTC alert time for you to be able to put that alert onto SOTAWatch. It handles 5. Yep. How do we close that? All right, we've got time to quickly. Right. gear. This is just what works for me. Firstly, I can show you what else is in the pack if you're interested later, but as far as the radio gear is concerned, I run a FT817, and when I'm operating, it just comes out together like this. So I've got an 817, I originally started off just with that. I had it modified for 10 watts. The Yaesu service agent in Melbourne, the guy there, who's actually called Guy, is an amateur. He's got one himself. He did the mod for $50. You can read on the net how to do it, but you've got to make sure you get all the settings right, the current and so forth. So for $50, that now puts out close to 10, depending on the band. Started off with just that, but with the way the propagation is at the moment, I then got a HF mini power amplifier that puts out up to 35-40 watts with 1 watt input. So I dial the 817 down to minimum, and because I've had it modified, the minimum is about 0.7 or 0.8 watts. Into that puts out 30 watts. Batteries, I've got a LiPo, a 3S LiPo that I use to run the power amplifier. With the 817 I charge up the internal NiCats before I go, and then I've got a little 9.9 lithium iron phosphate which just trickle charges that, and I can run probably 3 days of activations with that gear. So I'm only running the 817 at 0.7, 0.8 watts. Okay, so that's not taking much, and the amp actually doesn't draw much. That actually runs down quicker than that does. Just at the end of the bonus period, we did a part drive, part walk activation of 3 days in the Victorian High Country. Did 161 points in 3 days. I didn't recharge that at all. That's that side. Antenna wise, you'll notice soda beams. I've got some here from them. So I've got a 40 metre dipole. That was what I started with. Actually, the only bits that are originally from soda beams is the orange bit, the winders, and the coax. We use that much that the radiating wire wore out, so I've had to remanufacture that. And then, as I said, moved from 40 only to 40/80. So I made up a couple of segments to add on. I use a dipole. Some people use end-fed long wires and so forth. I stick with that because you can get through on 40 or 80, and means you don't need a tuner. I also, and I might add, this is sort of day trip type stuff. If I was going on an extended overnight, I'd drop the amp, I'd drop this heavy case. This just protects it. Just take the 817 and run it at 10 watts, and take the bigger battery. Lightweight headphones, you can use earbuds. That's really handy in two situations. One, obviously, if it's really noisy, a lot of wind, or if you've got a lot of interference, it's hard to pick out signal. But also, if you're in quite a public site, it's sort of a bit discreet then to use your earphones. You can't mask your own voice, but at least tourists and that around the place aren't hearing all the radio chat. Squid poles. Started off with this one, which was 7 metres. You find with a squid pole, you have to take out the first 2 or 3 segments. So they're too whippy. You find you put them up and it's like that. So I've taken off the first 2, and the little orange plastic bit slips over the top of that. That's a fiberglass one, similar to what you get from Haverfords. It's 7 metres. You take a couple of sections off, and it's about 5 metres up in the air. It's quite battered because it's done about 2,000 points. Recently got out of China a carbon fibre. This was originally 12 metres. Take off 2 or 3 segments, and it's about 10 metres. Carbon fibre, so I wouldn't use it for anything vertical like a J-pole or an infit, but for a dipole it's fine. In fact, measured it and nothing's changed. And on air, simply because of the extra couple of metres in the air, it's only anecdotal, it's not possible to measure it, but I believe it's better than that. Ends up weighing about the same because I've got a bit of protection on. Often you have to find a rock to jam your pole in, so I put some shrink wrap on it. I don't use hose clamps, that's extra weight and also mucking about. What I have done is in the bottom of all the squid poles is put some solid foam, because if the segments come down, and they do come down, it means they're not going to bash out the bottom, which could smash the carbon fibre. And what I did do in this before I wake up to it, smash the bottom out of it so it's all taped up. Okay, that's about it. Any questions?
What voltage is the new motor?
This one? It's a 3, so it's normally 11.1 and you can charge at 12.6.
Okay.
Yeah, I've written those on there because I can never remember. Oh, and with the 817 shows the voltage on the display, so I keep an eye on that. But you're probably aware you don't want to run lipos or lifebows down below, or in the case of that one, below 9. You get a couple of these little things which go onto the charging wires, and not only do they tell you the overall voltage, the cell voltage, but you can also set the appropriate voltage at which they'll alarm, which is handy for that one on the amp. So if it drops down, I think it's set for about 9.5, so if it goes down below that, that'll alarm. Take it out before I damage the battery.
So what would that actual field kit weigh? So the radio, batteries, and
Well, I can fill my pack up. I mean, my whole pack for all this is probably about 12 kilos, which is reasonable weight for a day trip. As I said, this Pelican case adds a fair bit to the weight, but given that you're lugging this stuff around the bush, I wanted something that was going to protect it. Plus, when I go to operate, I looked at all sorts of alternatives where you could have, Tupperware containers and have cables come in, so you didn't have to reconnect things. You want to get on the air reasonably quickly. Plus, often it's inclement weather, so that all packs away like that.
of course you want to make sure when you get to the sun that stuff's actually in working
Yeah,
condition.
you
So
want to
it's
protect your batteries
yes.
as well from bouncing around. So,
catching fire or
that's not light in itself. It's probably 3 kilos or something like that. This is not too much. And I don't carry a ladder around. Just bring my squid pole up, just a couple of straps, so you can tie it to a tree or a tree. Or up on Wellington, there's a little spot to the left of the walkway down to the observation thing. There's a little notch. You can shove that in the rock, and then joining those two together, you can secure it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this. I do like the tips regarding the squid poles and the shock absorbing of this. A little subtle thing I guess you don't find out on day one, but at some point later when you find out your equipment's for it, $80 or so for squid poles, reasonable investment. It's a nice little tip.
The carbon one's a bit more. Just one tip on that. I originally put some, the sort of foam that you get on your radio, that white sort of stuff. I thought, that'd be okay. Put it in this, and did a few activations, and the pole did come down once or twice, and I thought, and I'd shoved it in the ground, so I better clean it out. I took it out, and the foam was just squidged up into this little ball of nothing. So then I actually got some decent rubber put in there rather than foam.
Have you found after lots of use of your squid poles, there's sticking?
No. You sort of get used to how much
Tension?
tension to put when you screw the joints together, how much is enough and not too much, because if you overdo it, then they're hard to get down. Particularly if there's a bit of a bend, you've got to take the tension off your dipole before you pull them down. If there's any bend in the squid pole, they're really hard to come down. But no, there's no sticking, and you know they've got a little bit of sort of the ground a little bit where the two sections meet together. They haven't worn out either. They still stay up pretty well.
And you're cleaning in care, you're just dusting down with a damp cloth or whatever?
Yeah, look, I pull them apart. Like, I don't pull this apart too often because I've taped it all up. Probably once a year I'll pull it apart. You find it's wet inside, you give it a clean out.
I thought the other important point you made was respecting the chasers, because they're very useful when you're actually operating to give you a spot. So they'll put out a spot to say you're operating, and then other people will find you. So being nice to everybody else, and particularly they've been so helpful to me in terms of giving me guidance on how to operate and what to do. So it's,
There's a few regular soda guys that will always put out a spot for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, VK2IO that you mentioned,
Yeah.
I mean, he looks after me as well.
PF, if you, I should have also mentioned, it's pretty obvious, I suppose, that a lot of the soda summits are actually in parks. So if you want to do both, you can do both. But there's also a lot of soda operators who are also parks activators, hunters like VK3PF, he does both, holds awards in both. If you can't get a spot out for whatever reason, there's quite a few chasers who will put one up for you. As I said, if anyone's interested, I can show you the rest of the gear, which is not radio gear, but stuff I carry to be safe in the bush.
No, not squid roll. I don't have a presentation, but all I was going to do was actually go through my pack. Very quickly, just to give you an idea about what's in there and why it's in there. I too have a squid pole, but mine is in much worse condition than Mitch's. And in fact, the bottom segment of this is broken, which is why there's all of this tape on it. So I can't put it up quite as high as everybody else. And Mitch's comment about the top segments, forget it. They're not even in this squid pole. I think that's the last one. But the other thing is, I put some Velcro, double-sided Velcro on there. That's and you can buy this stuff for next to nothing. There's a roll of it for whatever. It was a couple of dollars and free shipping. And there's Velcro on here, and that's what I use to tie around things. And I've also got more of that in the actual pack. This is the day pack. It is. I try to keep it under 20 kilos, but it starts off at 20 kilos with the water in it. Because you take a couple of litres of water. There is a first aid kit in there. Very importantly, to recharge my phone, there is a battery pack in there as well. So you'll notice it's all in plastic bags as well. Keep it dry. Oh, for the photo. Hat. This is the survival kit. So there is actually a real compass in there. If we need it, there's spare batteries, there are matches, there is a flint stick in there, there is all sorts of stuff in there, so that's actually a survival pack. Oh, toilet paper.
Last of all luxuries.
So you don't need
very importantly in here there is a polar fleece, which one of the things that both Ruben and I have experienced is hypothermia. Because you climb to the mountain and you sweat like anything, you get to the top and it's usually exposed. and the first thing you realise is you're starting to get cold. So the first thing that Ruben and I do when we get to the top is put on our polar fleece, even if the sweat's pouring out of us. Because a couple of times we've just got to a point where we start to shake, and you just go, no, hang on, let's pull back here a little bit. So hypothermia. Gaiters, there are some tracks around Tasmania where these come in really handy. So for those who don't know, gaiters go around your legs, so they protect the lower legs. And you can see that's, in fact, I think that was the needles. I think the last time we did that, and the needles is particularly wet. You've got gloves, because when you get to the top, you need them.
Would the gaiters help with snakes as well?
Oh, well and truly. They could probably bite through that, but at least you'd probably be able to kick them off. And there are tracks that we've been on where you're pushing through low grass, so you don't know what you're stepping into. Yes. Hoochie. So this is, I looked and looked and looked, and these are damn expensive online. I actually bought this material, really, and it's ripstop nylon, so it's tent material. I purposely bought it as the iridescent one, so if I ever get into a situation where we're in trouble and we actually have to signal, that's what it does. That is built, that's big enough to actually go over the top of the lower layer of a trig point, so you can actually make a tent at the trig point, which we've done a few times where it's been really wet.
And that's a commercial one.
Yeah.
These are only about $80.
That cost me about $20 and free shipping, and a bit of time on the sewing machine and the thing over. But same thing, exactly the same thing. The other thing that we take with us, this is a ground sheet, where we've been operating in snow on Mount Wellington. Ground sheet's really handy because you can actually stick it on the snow and then basically put everything on top, and you're then not getting wet. The business end, I too use link dipole. I'll hand this around because this is actually an 8-band link dipole that's been tuned. The little links, and this is thanks to Warren actually put me on to, and Ron will probably recognise these. These are sold by Radio Control. They're a little barrel connector. They're gold plated. We originally had alligator clips on here, but they rust really quickly because it gets wet. RG174, lighter than RG58, much lighter than RG58. And the middle, there's a hole in that's big enough to go over that top segment of the squid pole. So, there's tent pegs in here. If you go through airport security, take the tent pegs out. Or they'll take them out. But that's the link dipole. For anybody who's interested in link dipoles, we did a session on link dipoles a little while ago when we kicked the soda stuff off. I brought in a whole lot of stuff here, which is the instructions for making link dipoles, including the link to where the spreadsheet is to do the cut segments. So there's some stuff there.
Are those PDFs on Reast at all, or?
They're actually, I think they're on my blog site.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I think they're still there. Pack cover for when it gets wet. Last time I used that, it was Mount Montague, and when we walked out, we got back to the car, and it was absolutely pissing down. And I got back to the car, and the pack was dry, but the pack cover was full of water. And I took it off, and all this water came out. I just went, okay.
Another 20 kilos.
Batteries. After lots of looking, I used to use a LifePo battery. Now, and the normal SLA batteries are 3.3 kilos. This is 1 kilo, and it gives me exactly the same capacity. And we've done a couple of days of activations, and this has got nowhere near being flat. I use an 817, same as Mitch. you'll notice everything's in dry packs. 817 unmodified, so I'm running on the 12 volts, I'm getting the 5 watts out of it. The one thing I have done though is there is a wonderful little modification to the power connector on the back to put an Anderson connector on it, which is exactly what I've done because they survive being bashed around a bit. And the other thing, if you haven't done with your 817, is put 2 fuses on there because I have already blown this up once. And the rest of it is the last little bit. Plastic bags, plastic bags, plastic bags. It's a theme here. I actually take a spare microphone with me because Mount Montague, the microphone failed. It was actually the microphone. The dynamic element in the microphone failed. And so we actually finished that activation with a handheld, with Ruben and I running around on the top of Mount Montague trying to find where there was a path to do that 4th contact. So I actually take a spare microphone with me. There is, I do a paper log. I don't do an electronic log. I got log sheets that we just literally, and the log sheets I think are on the blog site as well. That's what, and you'll find in here there are probably more pencils than there are pens, because pencils work when the paper's wet. So anyway, that's me. There is some Bibles, as Mitch referred to them. There are 4 here. If you are really interested in soda, please take one. And that is literally the Bible in Tasmania. So yeah. Anyway, that was all I was gonna do.
How heavy is your pack all up, Justin?
Sorry?
How heavy is the pack all up?
70 kilos.
No, there's a spare fuse that just fell out of here.
He said he starts at 20.
The pack as it stands, I think is about 8 or 9 kilos. But bear in mind, if you're going on a decent trip, you'd have 2 litres of water in there, which is another 2 kilos. We've been on a few overnighters where we take bigger packs with us, but literally just the radio, the battery and the link dipole go in a smaller pack, and we do the day trips to the summits. It's anyway, you can feel it. You can certainly feel it. It's interesting. You can see through the bottom of that pack. Never noticed that one.
Yeah, I've pretty much got everything that Justin went through, with the addition of GPS. And I've got all of the BK summits on there as waypoints, so it helps to find them. And because I do a lot of activations on my own, other than that, pretty much exactly the same.
And is that a watch hanging on that side?
Yeah.
Well, actually, in the radio pack, where those microphone is, there's a watch in there, because I don't wear a watch. I actually rely on my phone, and if the phone goes flat, you haven't got time. Although Ruben wears a watch, I don't wear a watch. So there's actually a watch in that pack that I put next to me. So anyway, that's it. That's me.
Can explain it. It uses a commercial satellite network as opposed to GPS, and it works a little bit like a PLB. So you hit the call recovery button, and it sends a signal with your locations, which ends up boosted, and then they pass it to search and rescue here. The added advantage though is it's not that particular one is an early model. It's pretty simple. You can send 3-4-letter SMSs. So I've got one that says, one that says,
mine needs to be passed around. Mine is different.
But it sends you position as well.
But the other thing is you can set it to track, and it'll send you position breadcrumbs.
Do any?
And My friends will come and give them the
No, you got that. Amazing.
Yeah, with a bit more.
I ran one single day.
That's the one.
With the exception of
It's a real expensive Rich.
Yeah, 2003.
That was a real one.
Somebody carried the bloody generator.
It's more sophisticated now where you can do two-way SMS on free form, whereas that one, you've got to pre-format it on the website before you go out. You can't change Yeah, well, some of them are self-contained, but they're pretty expensive. I've never had to use it again. It's been handy for people that see the breadcrumbs.
I couldn't believe how long let's break Hayward or something. It listens to the GPS transmits.
Well, this is a slightly different sort of soda, portable operation.
Could be soda.
Well, I don't think you'd walk up to the top of the hill with this stuff, but it is portable. So, my interest has been in extending the world record on 3 centimetres, EME record, which previously I held at 18,951 kilometres. And the only way to get that any further was to go to New Zealand, portable, and carry all the gear on an aeroplane, including a dish. The issue is something like this. Once you start to get to the point where you're almost on the other side of the world to each other, there's no way you can actually see the moon if you both beam horizontal. But if you can, you would have to beam down at 1.2 degrees at both ends in order that you can both see the full moon. And there are ways you can tend towards that. First of all, you get some refraction in the atmosphere, which gives you about 0.7 of a degree. To get the rest, you've got to go to a very high place and look over a very low place like the sea. The reality is you just can't find a place that will actually get you from one side of the earth to the other. But you can get pretty close, and the record that I just did was 19,116 kilometres. So I think it's possible to do a bit better, but system performance will have to be improved. I won't go into the detail because we've got a bit too many slides. The advantages of portable operation, you can find locations. I mean, most people who operate EME do it from a home location, and very few people can beam at the horizon. Usually there's houses next door, there's something that obstructs you. You can optimise the distance. You do all the sums and you work out what's the maximum your system performance will do, and then you find 2 locations that are on hills, that are looking over water, that are on the opposite side of the earth, as close as you can get. So portable operation is probably the only way you're ever going to break these sort of records. The disadvantages are you can't take big dishes, and a lot of these home stations use 3 and 5 and even 10-metre dishes, which are pretty hard to take portable. Both stations have got to be available at the same time to go to a portable location, and getting 2 people organised, one in the northern hemisphere, one in the southern, because it's usually winter in the southern when it's summer in the northern, doesn't work. You need reliable operators at both ends. There's no point in going out and finding the other guy doesn't turn up or says, oh, my gear doesn't work today.
Now, in order to get to New Zealand, I needed a way of carrying a dish, and I looked on the web, and there's this lovely system for a portable antenna that all clips together, about the right size, and they did say it's an affordable off-the-shelf microwave system. Well, I sent them an email to get a price, and they didn't even bother replying. I sent them another email, they still didn't reply. I got a mate who ran a communications company to write with his letterhead, and they replied, yes, thank you, we'd be pleased to supply them. They're $16,000 US each and a minimum quantity of 10. So that wasn't the solution. What I did is I cut up a standard Mytech dish. Some of you around here all were lucky enough to get Mytech dishes from the ex-Hydro, and I cut up one of mine, not really certain that it would work, but in the end it did, and that then packs down into a suitcase. So all the outside petals wrap up and go into the suitcase, the centre section, and the outside rims that holds it all together. Of course, you've got to have some way of mounting it, so here's the mounting, which all goes into the same suitcase. Now, the suitcase has got a lot more in it, which I won't go into. The most sensitive bit is to take your transmitter and the head unit, which I didn't want in the sort of in the whole baggage getting smashed to pieces. So I wanted to carry this, and of course some of the guys said you're not going to get that through security, but we did. I did some tests with G3 Whiskey Delta Golf, and these were tests where the elevation was fairly high, and we had 3 dB to spare. He had a similar sized portable operation, which he was going to go to the south coast of the UK. By the time I go to ZL, we're almost 0 elevation, and that introduces losses due to absorption, ground noise, and you not only get losses due to the attenuation in the atmosphere at 10 gigs, but you get noise caused by the attenuation, because it's effectively putting a resistor in front of your antenna. When you add all those losses up, we were right on the margin, so we had to pick a time when the conditions were perfect. This means the moon as close as possible to the Earth, and the moon not wobbling, so the spreading was minimal. And there was only one day this could be done, which happened to be the 24th of October this year, and I only got the dish to work just before that, so it was all done a lot quicker than I had hoped. We did some tests, Larry and I, off the south of where you look over Blackjack Rock down here.
Goats Bluff.
Cliff. What's it?
Goats Bluff.
Goats Bluff. And the interesting thing we found out, that the noise, you know, if you beam high, the noise you get through the atmosphere is lower and increasing as you beam lower. But for horizontal polarization, it curls over. For vertical polarization, it keeps going. There's an explanation for that, which I won't go into, but I think this is all new information. What that means is you ought to use horizontal polarization to minimise the noise. We then did a test with Charlie, where I went up to Mount George near Launceston, and beamed over the water, so I minimised the noise, and then looked at what the signal strength did as it went down to both 0 and below. Now he was using his 3 metre dish, so he had plenty of power, so I could still decode him, but it did indicate that it was costing about 9 dB if we're going to start working down at 0 degrees due to all the absorption and absorption noise. The interesting thing, again I think this is new information that no one would obviously realise, is if you go up high you can see the moon down further in the horizon, but instead of going just through that bit of atmosphere, you're now going through nearly twice as much atmosphere. So you're almost doubling the absorption and making life difficult for yourself, even though you're getting a bit more time. So your system performance has got to be improved. So when I got to ZL, Roger, ZL3RC, had agreed to help me with another ZL Dave, and this is what the dish looked like in pieces as we assembled it. Almost complete, and the dish part complete. Then assembling the feed. Roger had a lovely tripod, really solid, and we mounted my head unit on that. Did a demonstration for the ZL VHFs. They worked, about 8 of them worked W5WA, and here's the whole group. Then we're going to go to the west coast of New Zealand from Christchurch to the west coast. There were 4 potential grid squares that we thought we could work, and we worked the first one at was 47 metres above sea level. You can see we're not getting very high. It's actually very hard to get a vehicle at any height on the west coast of New Zealand. They've got mountains that are enormous, but you can't drive off them. So this is the first site where we operated from. We hired a camper van and a trailer, and here was the dish beaming out over the water. Roger had built this frame which we could mount the dish on. The dish was just too wide to fit in the trailer, so it had to be on an angle. And that's the dish mounted inside the trailer. I mounted the head unit on a board inside the camper van on a bed with seat belts. These were the sort of options. The best day was the 24th of October, and green means it was the signals were going to be stronger than in our test that we'd done earlier. Blue means it was still possible, taking account of the reserve we had during the test, and the red meant it wouldn't be possible as we calculated it. So it was possible on these 3 days to potentially break the world record. I actually did see a single tone from Charlie on this first day, but I was primarily working other stations to give them the grid squares in Europe. And as we predicted, there was no way we got a decode, but we at least knew the system was working to about its performance. The next day, Charlie was all ready to go, but just as he was about to transmit, he had a equipment failure, so that one was ruled out. The next day, it rained like hell, and I wasn't game to put my gear out in this rain because of a lot of wind and that we got underneath it. And finally we got through on this day. And the predictions all worked out pretty well. This was that earlier, the grid square before we did the world record. and this is the site where we did the world record. The height was about 110 metres, so as good as you could get, and it's really hard to find locations where you've got a clear sight over the water. Lots of Google Earth searching. This is Charlie's location in England. He went to a place called Start Point, which is here, and he was beaming out over the water. And he has a slightly bigger dish than me, very solid tripod, all very well set up. This was my operating position in the camper van. And these signals up the top are other European stations, but when we get down to here, that's working Charlie. And you can see this single tone here. That was an OK station who was giving me a signal out of the passband where Charlie was, so at least I knew I was lined up. Charlie's signal is actually in here, but it's so weak you can't see anything on the waterfall. This was the world record QSO, and you know, we had time to exchange information. Charlie says, thanks, so happy. I know what TT stands for, Fine Business 19105 kilometres, which is what we thought it was at the time. And then we had time for a second QSO. And that worked out pretty well in line with the calculations. Clearly that shows there is some capacity to go a bit further. It's going to be really hard to find the spots on both sides.
We need bigger dishes.
Yes.
Helicopter.
Now, if I degrade the signal by 3 dB by adding 3 dB of noise to the files, I'm still at the centre getting text messages through, but we're starting to miss some of the information. So we had something to spare, but certainly only the order of about 3 dB to spare. Now, at the very end, Charlie started sending a single tone, and you can just see the single tone there if you've got some imagination. But when you integrate it over the full minute, it's quite identifiable. And that was when the elevation was down at my end at -1 degree in terms of straight geometry. So I was relying on the refraction and the little bit of height to get through. That sort of signal, you'd need at least 6 dB more than that to decode a message. But it gives you an idea of what will be necessary to extend the record much further. Now, this is the three of us congratulating ourselves.
Cool.
Now, I guess this, in terms of tonight's topic, these are my comments about portable operations on 10 gigs EME. You're going to be able to point accurately at the moon, and while there are lots of options, if you can't see the moon, you can't get a reference because you're beaming over water and there's nothing you can locate. We did use a little differential GPS unit which David VK38Z made up for me, but I haven't been able to get that to work reliably unless the sky is completely, no trees, or even round here I can't get it to work because these antennas masts produce reflections. So I haven't really got a final answer, but it did work where we had to do it. You've got to be on frequency, that means GPS locking, and because there's up to 20 kc of Doppler shift. You've got to correct for Doppler as the moon's moving. The timing's got to be correct. In Australia, it's useful to do a check by just ringing up 1194 and saying, yes, my timing is right. You need reliable equipment and operators. There's a number of guys I work with who are really keen on getting grid spurs in both, or primarily in Europe, but often they at club stations. They've got to go out at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning to their club station. They're not going to do that unless they know you're going to turn up and you're going to be reliable and your equipment's going to work. So it's very much like Mitch's respect for the people at the other end. You can check system performance with sun noise and a weak signal source, and for transmit, if the PA current's right, you can be reasonably sure you're transmitting. Work big stations until you get experience, and Richard worked his first big station and is on his way.
It's probably the biggest.
One of the biggest, yes. He worked HB9Q, who runs a 10-metre solid dish. It's not portable.
He hasn't met you, Rex. He hasn't worked out how to cut it up into a big
Cut it up in pieces. Okay. With a 1.2 metre dish, which is the size I used, and 60 watts, you can work stations of a similar size under all conditions. But once you get to these extreme distances with atmospheric absorption and ground noise, you need something a bit better. There's about a 10 dB difference between good and bad conditions on EME, on 10 gigs, due to combination of the moon going round in an elliptical orbit, so sometimes it's closer. It also causes vibration spreading of the signal because the moon wobbles, and that can spread the signal by up to a couple of hundred hertz. And if you're trying to do narrow band sensitive modes, which have got a bin width of 2.5 hertz and a couple of hundred hertz spreading, it costs you. And there's also, for the big stations, they have the problem that their dish focuses all its energy on the moon, so for reception they're picking up the noise from the moon, because the moon is actually quite warm in degrees Kelvin, like about 212 degrees Kelvin, and that produces 2 to 3 dB of noise on a large dish. Make lists so you take everything you need, and I'm sure that applies to you and everybody else. Thank you.
Rex, you said increasing height increases attenuation.
Yes.
But then you said in New Zealand you're looking for height. Is there?
Well,
you're looking for some height, but not too much.
No. If you want more, if you want to extend the distance, you have to at least go sufficiently high that you can both see the moon at the same time, and then you have to live with the attenuation.
What's the optimum height, do you think?
No, it's always going to be better to go higher, but you're then going to have more system performance. I guess if your system performance is fixed, there's going to be no point in going higher. You're limited in distance. But I wouldn't want to say there's an optimum height. There would be for any given system performance. Yes. But I'm pretty sure that I reckon if I could find appropriate places at both ends, I could extend this probably another to 19,400, something like that. There isn't such places anywhere on Earth. I mean, to find two places that are exactly opposite on land, New Zealand's about New Zealand to Europe is about the only places you can do it. You can't do it from Australia to North America. If you go around the equator, you get much more absorption because the air holds much more moisture. So it's always going to have to be done from somewhere in the northern hemisphere to somewhere south. And unfortunately, most of the southern hemisphere is full of water.
You can't do it from the poles.
So basically New Zealand.
Oh, no, North and South Poles would be brilliant. It's just that it's not that easy to get to the North Pole. And the Americans get really iffy about doing projects like this, which are just ham radio operations at the South Pole.
It reminded me, Rex, a few years ago when you and I were doing the test swing of the optical stuff.
Yeah.
How you moved on to this, but using that same programs and looking at the spike, I remember particularly you were on my deck and you said, I'm definitely transmitting, stay there, I'll come down. So we drove all down to my house. We lined up the light to your place and he goes, there it is. And I'm going, what? He said, that little stick, that little pip. And I'm going, you're kidding, is that the signal? He said, yeah, just hang on a minute, and the stick went, come up like that. That's
It's the same program, yes.
the same program, Spectran or something. No,
Sorry, it wasn't. Yeah,
That's sorry.
this was the waterfall on WSJ2.
So
but
people
that
that
was
were out
Spectrum
shooting
Lab.
that night, we all saw that
Yeah,
when you broke that record.
yeah.
And then of course later on when we went up the coast, we knew what little point thing to look at. That was fantastic. Thank you.
So how many practice runs did you do to actually work through to make sure your checklists and everything were there, and when you wrote in ZL?
In ZL?
Yeah, everything you packed was right, and there was none of that.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, I left one of those gadgets behind on the kitchen bench.
Yeah. Well, I set up a sked with W5LUA as soon as, on the day I arrived, not really being aware how long it was going to take to set everything up. And I had to cancel that to the next day. We did a test and it worked out well. And then 2 days after that, we had this demonstration from all the Christchurch guys. And that worked out well. You know, they were all just working W5LUA one after the other. I should say he used a 5-minute edition, 190 watts. But so we knew the system was right, but every time you set up again, you've always got that doubt. You've got to cart it to the other side of New Zealand and hope that it's all going to.
Why didn't you use a dish from over there? Does it have to be your equipment? Is that
No,
part of the rule?
no. Well, that's a good question, because originally I wrote to a number of ZLs who were into microwaves and asked them if they had a dish they could lend me. But I was specifically after prime focus, fairly light, and I said my tech dish preferable, because I needed something that I knew when I got there would actually work. And you know, every dish is different focal lengths and stuff, and the mechanicals. And I didn't actually get a positive response. And I think the reality is, we're very lucky to have these Mytech dishes. There's not a lot of them around. And this club
Has its fair share.
has more than its fair share. I don't think we're going to get any more, are we, mate?
There's a couple of my house.
The Mytech dishes?
I think so. They look very similar to that.
Okay.
There's some deals.
Yeah, so
We'll get tricky to have a look.
I mean, the advantage of taking my own was when I got there, I knew mechanically it was all going to fit together and work.
Plus what the system can actually do in the field. So if it doesn't match expectations, you know there's an issue.
Well, that's right. It wasn't quite as good when I assembled it in New Zealand as was when I assembled it here, because I measured sun noise. The sun noise here was 8.7 dB and it was down to 8.4 in New Zealand. It was a bit disappointing.
Well, there's much sun over there.
Lack of sun. Yes.
New Zealand, son.
Long white cloud.
That's great. Good work.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this. It's, as always, exciting and interesting and challenging, and how much I've got to learn.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I guess now we'll head over to Gary. Gary?
Okay, thank you. I'm on VK7 JGD, and I think I'm preaching to the converted. How you going, Kat? But anyway, I'm glad Rex is here tonight because I've got some footage of before he discovered the moon, he was chasing grid squares. And I'll just run through my radio stuff as quick as I can, so I think you'll probably find seeing our Rex is here to give some commentary. My crappy little video will probably make a lot more sense. But anyway, that black and white photo, what year was that, did you say?
1926.
1926. I was looking for something on the internet and I couldn't find anything anywhere. But anyway, even back in 1926, the wives wouldn't let the husbands run in the lounge room or on the kitchen table, so they all had to go portable. That's why they're out on their cars.
Running board portable.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you had some great granddads around, they'd be able to tell us the story of how the car got caught alight when they put the radio on the back seat. But anyway, but that's how they were running it back in those. Now this, as you can see from here, sort of dates me, but that's 1980 gear, and I lived in Sydney at the time, and HF in 1980 was just forget it. I hate to think what it's like now. So you had to take your radio out of the laundry cupboard in one easy package, put it in your 4-wheel drive, plug her into the vehicle battery with your T connector. Anderson plugs weren't really around back those days. These are still good value, take a fair amount of current. Cold winter's day, you can hang on to it. But anyway, 1984 Kenwood, similar vintage, 2 metre, antenna come pointer. And this would get you on the air on top of a hill, not a mountain. No safer back those then, it was just hills. So that's just 2 metres, quarter wave. There, all 5/8 minutes pulled up, I think it's one section up, quarter wave. Linear amp, that all runs off the car battery of course. Small battery there so you can fire up your 2 metres straight away if you wanted to. But I've had that for, this is probably about the Mark III frame, but I've had that running for quite a while, quite a few years. Antenna tuner does long wires as well as flat ribbon, 300 or 400. So you've got that all covered in anything covered there, so you could run a long wire out. So basically that was my radio for a long time. Brought that down to Tasmania, and that's when I started to get more time to play radio, and also it was a lot quieter down here back then, RF wise, but now it's unfortunately it's getting worse and worse. But it was 1,000% back in 1989 than what it was in Sydney. You could actually hear stations. So that's my portable setup from 1980, and as I said, that kept us going for quite a while. I just discovered this the other day. I wasn't really looking for anything, but this is in an old AR magazine. And if you think back about that black and white photo of 1926, this is a little article on portable radio in 1935. Two-way radio phone communications was established with a portable mobile transceiver below the rooms in the Queen Street, and by means of a loudspeaker in the meeting room progressed to the mobile station, was followed as it moved along Queen Street. This is up in Brisbane, I think. At this time there were not many VHF enthusiasts, so this demonstration inspired great interest and brought into being the WIA 56 megahertz group. The late John Moyle was an early 56 megahertz experimenter. 1935, Amateur Radio magazine carried an operating and experimenting section covering 28 megahertz, 56 megahertz, 112 megahertz and 224 megahertz. The Gadsden Trophy was awarded to the group for outstanding work on these bands over a period from June 35 to June 36. It was the first experimenter's trophy for annual presentation. The Queensland group notched up the Australian distance record, 70 miles, in the 56 to 112 megahertz region in 1935. And in May of that year, we're setting up for tests over a 150 mile path. The Queensland group also achieved duplex contacts between 2 flying aeroplanes and 2 moving cars. One plane directed the cars around the suburbs in which the tests were conducted. So if you think back what gear those guys had on their running boards in 1926, they got it to the point where they got it in aeroplanes and they're running around in cars in that short time, simply because their wives wouldn't let them put it on the kitchen table. So, you know, you've got to take your hats off to these guys. And in 1935, the Tasmanian division of the Wireless Institution of Australia staged its first state field day in March of 1935, held at Campbelltown, 80 miles from Hobart, at which, wait for it, the northern amateurs met the southern amateurs. So that was portable back then. If anybody remembers FT 200s, I was loaned one of these when I first got my licence. This is a little bit about its compact size, lightweight, and attached carrying handle make it very suitable and convenient for both home, portable and mobile use. And it only weighed 17.5 pounds dry without the oil and water. So that was just the radio. Then on top of that you had either your AC or your DC supplies, and it had 16 tubes, 15 diodes and 7 transistors, so it was a bit of a hybrid. But you sort of think what we've got today, and this was just the start, I guess, of the manufacturers realising there was a market for portable radios. Just kick this over. So I basically operated that at home, all the way out on a field day or a licensed activity for quite a while, until these little animals came along. And how I came across these was, we used to go to Triabana Lighthouse on Lighthouse weekend, and I used to take that, and others had the amateur radios of the day, and this one's got the battery pack in it. I don't know if anybody's been to the Triabana Lighthouse, but it's got a single wire 240 feet coming in, and we used to set up sort of independent stations around the lighthouse, so we sort of weren't interfering with each other because we operate different bands. And I went out there with this setup, turned on the radio, put up the aerial first, my big dipole, plenty of wire, gotta have plenty of wire. Put up this dipole, turned the radios on, noise. Couldn't hear anything. Terrible noise. Unbelievable. Thought, there goes the weekend. Wandered back down to where Ray VKV, 7 VKV was set up with his Yosu, and he's talking to people. And you could hear them. Hello, hello, what's this? And he demonstrated to me the wonders of noise reduction. The push of a button. Push the dial, hit a few DSP buttons, all the noise that was, all you had to play with on this one obviously is just your RF gain and IF shift and stuff, but that just brained it all. So up until then I didn't think I really needed a radio that had lots of memories and stuff, menus to work through and everything, but when I saw that in about 5 minutes I decided I'll need one of those immediately. So I bought that at Moyuna. So everybody has to go to Moyuna if you want to buy a good radio. And not only that, apart from Apart from that, it has a green light in the display that you can change the colours with, and everybody knows green's better for DX. So that's, apart from that, that's one of my radios that I use a bit. Sometimes I use it for the broadcast on Sundays. So everybody sort of knows about those. This other stuff's just basically some of the wires and stuff we've had over the years. The old ubiquitous Phillips jobs. They're all, these actually have been set up by Roger, ARN, hence the signage and the little trickeries for bringing the cables out. He puts a lot of stuff, a lot of thought into it. So if you get out on a job, these are geared up for 2 metres and our commercial frequency we've got. So it's just a separate head deal. Getting a bit dated now, but they still work. This one here's just a quad bander. Everybody's probably seen those. A couple of batteries in there, gel cells, and it's basically just a transportable. It's not a soda gadget in any means, but if you're going out somewhere and you need to talk to a repeater or something, or somebody a couple of k's away on a horse enduro or something, you just plonk that on the ground and you can talk, or in the room where you are, and that'll do quite a bit of transmitting. So you've got 2 batteries in there. So that's a little lightweight sort of transportable type thing. Generally we go over to full power when you get on site, so you can run off a generator and run full power. This is just another one. It's a bit the same thing on a different plan of attack. That one's got a 240 power pack in with it, and it's a dual bander and crossband. So that one, obviously the quad bander's a crossbander as well. So let's have a look at those and have a look later. This here I think is my portable ATU to hang on the back of the Yaesu. Same deal, does everything, does long wire, flat ribbon, multimeter, 2 metre tuner if you use it, need it. We always use F connectors sort of most of the time, but not all the time, but we use crimp-on ones so that you can repair out on the field at any time. I guess everybody's seen a crimper, so you can do with a stripper and a crimper and the right connections, you can just do a joint. You don't need a soldering iron at all or anything. You can do all that on the job. So you got PL259 crimp connection, F connector crimp connection. In theory, you can't pull it apart, as opposed to some soldered ones, depending on how good your solder is. So that sort of runs out of hardware. How's our time going? If we flick up this bit of video, Rex can do the commentary.
Oh, it's
Fill
on
in
the
the
I
TV.
don't know what I'm going to see.
Yeah, well, you can.
Oh, okay.
The deal was, you needed to go to QE46, wasn't it?
Probably on here, but
Cape Boy.
Cape Hoy just
Sticks
poked
out
out into
into
a
a
grid square, and we had to walk about 7 kilometres.
Yeah, it's a bit opposite the, like, it's a full-blown expedition. It was like the four Mars bars and the banana. 4 hours return for walkers, so it took, I think it took about 2.5 for us to come back. I was in the professional recovery team, not the beginning expedition team. I don't know how I was not roped in, invited, but anyway, he persuaded me. And about eight other people.
It was a club exercise.
Club exercise, yeah.
You know, and about 8 people took the gear in, and another 8 brought it out, and
I'll fast forward through the parts where it's just, because it was a one-off trip, and I'd never been there before, never likely to probably go again. And I had at the time I had a lens of my mother-in-law's video camera, which I've still got.
Right.
So it's dated as well. But I think you'll get the general drift. Now if you just watch closely, you'll see how dedicated the people are because of the dress they're wearing. It was pretty crappy weather. But more importantly, if you listen to the video, audio, you'll see how professional we are. Is there audio up on the TV? Is there a remote?
The remote should be up there. Just on
You have to listen carefully because there's a few clues to the professionalism.
This is the recovery expedition to Cape Hoy. It's going to be a slightly damp day, but it's what is usually called a challenging walk. This is take 2 of the great Cape Hoy walk, and the Cape Hoy walk will now take the correct route.
This is Ian Mill, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rex is depending on us to find him.
And company back safely.
We stayed out overnight and bucketed down, and the way we'd set up the tent, we funneled all the water in into the bottom of the tent.
There's a fair bit of this nonsense, so we might fast forward through to the expedition site, because at the end of this there's a little bit of ice and stuff at the end as well, on a couple of target stages. So
Yeah.
I'll just hit the fast forward.
Eric Ferrier stayed overnight with me, and we worked 2 metres meteor scatter all the way up to VK4, and some 432 tropo scatter across to VK3 from a grid square that no one will ever get again. We're all too old to do it again.
Yeah. I think the track's supposedly been upgraded about a year or so.
Well,
after
it's
we were
part
out
of
there.
the three capes now.
Yeah.
You probably have to pay to get in there.
You'd be able to take the dish down there, Rex.
I don't think they knew you were there with you.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? There's a grid square that on 10 gigs EME.
I believe as part of the upgrade, there's huts and helipads out there now too, so might be able to go an easy way of walking.
Slow a bit down. Pretty windy. Knock the volume down. Fair bit of it there before we get to the thing I was supposed for. It's very, very scenic. Good spot for a picnic, once you get there. You went out cold anyway, didn't you? You went out, just didn't go out for a, whoop, didn't go out for a pre-setup or anything? You just
No,
went-
no, I had done a walk out there,
Did you?
but I hadn't taken the gear out. But
Didn't you decide you'd go a bit further just in case you weren't
no,
on the right thing?
no, that was Ian Milne's fault. He had a different GPS, which
Okay.
forced the. We thought I had picked a site which was in the grid square, and Ian Milne's GPS said we weren't in the grid square because he had a different WG database. So we had to work further to make sure.
Well, this is camp anyway. Rotating by the Armstrong method. So all those antennas are all pulled down and reassembled out there, and you've worked out how to pull them apart. They fill the generator is. So I didn't remember seeing anybody carrying an antenna, so they must have all packed away.
I've forgotten now.
Here's the digs. A little island Alright, that's all we get in here. The shack.
Probably still plenty of water in there.
So that's 12:01. We left. It took us 2.5 hours, I think, at least to get there. I forget what the clock said at the time.
Turn the radio around.
Yeah, we work a lot better if they had a good aerial. You want to come out, Eric? So how many nights are out there?
Just one night.
Just one night.
Yeah,
Okay.
just one night. Yeah. That was enough.
Yeah.
The generator.
I carried that out.
Yeah.
It wasn't too bad once you got on your back in a backpack. It was
Wow.
could have been worse.
It's a little 1 kVA. It's
Yeah, I was lucky it was a Honda. Nice
I-
and white one.
That's the one I still use.
I guess practice with carrying that rig around must make that quite nice and light.
Well, it was 13 kilos, that,
The main
which
power
is
feed.
a fair bit to carry
Yeah.
for the power station.
about 600 by the time you got it out there.
Ian Fletcher carried it out, and I didn't
Yeah.
realise that you carried it back. Thank you.
Good shutdown. The expedition is now finished. I wasn't too impressed when I first saw it, but once I got it on my back, it was decent haversack. It was okay. It was no worse than a big, heavy, overpacked camping haversack. But yeah, it's pretty rough territory out there. I'm not too sure how much there is of the campsite. Oh, haven't pulled the camp down yet. Eric was saying there's some guys come out in a cray boat not far off the rocks there and checked a few pots. Pretty rough for that. Just about ready to head. I think we're aiming for 1 o'clock. Heading off. That's one. There we go.
Okay, I'll just pull the thing down the drain now, so here we go.
There's a bit of the track. It was pretty hard to walk on. It was all rocks were sort of uneven, usual deal where the water runs down. The track was just a water course, really, in the real wet weather. So it was pretty washed out. Pressed the wrong button. Rest point. From there it says 2 hours return, and at the start it's 4 hours, so that's about halfway. That's where you turn off to go to Cape Billabong. So we'd be going at 14:05, so that would have we've been going about an hour to get to there. Sorry, 2 hours. No, 1 hour. Look, there's the Manly thing up. There's Rex at the end of a long day. This is where he decided he'd chase the moon instead. So it's 4 hours return there. Anyway, that's about the end of penguin on the beach there that his GPS has gone out of whack. Now the next bit is just random stuff that I've filmed at different times, but when we get to a pile of 4-wheel drive sitting on a hill, that's a target stage we did comms for as a Wyson group, which is any minute. This is hill 34C, I think. Back, yeah, 34C.
Set up in the world, Bauer?
Geeston, back at Geeston.
Jason.
Valley. They ran a target stage down into the airwalk and back out. We had a UHF link down to the airwalk, cross-banded to VHF, back up to Mount Nelson, cross-banded back down to UHF and back down to the casino. As well as the Targa repeater for the stage command from the ends to the finish. And we also had a command link on VHF, I think again. So the casino could talk straight back to either the start or the finish. And we were doing had a repeated network to do the results. And I think Roger had some digital stuff there. I can't remember whether it was Packet or something, but they had a digital network as well. Those aerials are a bit further apart than what they look, and we had height separation and all that sort of stuff. So it all appeared to work.
Here's the Wyson trailer.
Yeah.
Haven't seen
We
that
all
for a while.
run on those connectors at the moment, probably still do. A lot of them are gradually swapping over to Anderson plugs, but most of my stuff and most of the older stuff we use is running on those polarity plugs. But they're getting a bit expensive now. Bit of RF interference getting into the camera.
So ran out of time.
Just this is the end. Anyway. So. Oh, okay, yeah, fine. Okay, well that's basically the setup. Quite a bit of involvement setting up the antennas and stuff, but it all worked. So we've got a fair bit of that sort of stuff floating around on various ways of producing pictures. But most of the masting you'll see there's aluminium tubing telescoping into each other, so we just carry it out in lengths and just plug them together and stand them up beside the car, so they all go up pretty quick before the days of squid poles really. Anyway, we're on a time limit, we better run away quickly. Stop. Well, that's about me.
Thanks, Gary.
Well, thank you everybody for, I think, attending one of our longer presentation nights. One running this late in the evening, and certainly been this interesting. I must admit, when I saw Gary's review, I thought it was a CubeSat. The CubeSat in the 80s was like, yeah, that's pretty normal. Like you said, a whole range of options here for doing things in the outside world, the planning preparation, first aid kits, touch of civilization, expeditions, crews going and carrying equipment, people packing for solo trips. I found it very, very interesting myself. I thank Gary and Linda and Rex and Dave and Justin, of course, for a very, very interesting evening. I hope for another similar session probably next year. You're welcome coming in. If you have any questions, I guess Bauer, you're ready to speak over a cup of coffee and hopefully laughing before we get kicked out. Thanks once again for attending. Good evening, guys.
Thanks for watching.